This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Mother's Day is almost here, and you can get her the most beautiful time-tested gift around. A watch she can wear every day from Movement. Whether your mom is into classic dress watches, rare and refined ceramics, or tried-and-true bestsellers, Movement has something she'll love. And right now, everything at Movement is up to 50% off site-wide during their Mother's Day sale. A watch is a gift that celebrates all the time you spent with mom. And a Movement watch is even more than that. Movement uses industry-leading materials for their fresh modern watch designs, from technically complex ceramics to vintage-inspired style, all for an incredible value your wrist and wallet will both love. And with one-size-fits-all convenience and fast free shipping and returns, it's a stress-free shopping experience. Save big on the best Mother's Day gift ever with Movement. Get up to 50% off site-wide during their Mother's Day sale at mvmt.com. Again, that's up to 50% off at mvmt.com.
We made this.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to the Xcast. The truth is in here. I'm your host, Cortlan Waters Bartley, and today I have a very special guest here to talk about her time on The X-Files and beyond. You know her as everyone's favorite crystal-wearing big sister, Melissa Scully. It's Melinda McGraw. Welcome to the Xcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah, happy Valentine's Day. It's perfect. It's going to air really soon, I think, so it's totally fine. Yeah, excited to have you here. We had a lot of good questions in the mailbag. People are excited to hear about Melissa Scully. So,
excellent.
Also, I'm going to apologize in advance if I accidentally call you Melissa while we're talking.
That's okay. I know.
It might happen. Sorry.
It's fine. Totally understand.
Does that happen to you a lot when people talk to you about the X-Files? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we met back in September at FileFest. But we actually met at the second X-Fest con in Chicago, like years and years ago. I'm sure you don't remember me, but I'm sure you remember the con.
Was it right before COVID? Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of was. Yeah. And I have a picture, actually, I was going to show you. Yes, we sort of met in the lobby on the very last night, like after everything.
And I was down there with the Enigma getting drinks.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I have this really stunning. So that's me on the end. Yeah, we're kind of like really, for some reason, very hunched over. It's pretty funny. It's one of my favorites.
We're like going to do a kickoff or something.
Yeah. It looks like we're in a huddle. Yeah. Anyway, hilarious.
That was a fun night.
Yeah. I wasn't even going to stay that night. And then it turned out I was just too tired to drive back. So
you did the right thing.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, I was hoping you might want to just talk a little bit about that experience from back in September at FileFest. I know that was I think that you said that was your second con, right? Yeah. How was it?
It was great. I mean, the X-Files fans are very remarkable in a lot of ways because they like to talk about why they're fans. And that's what, you dream as an actor that something you're doing might be touching someone or, of course you want them to be entertained. But if something you do or you are involved with even is meaningful to someone on a personal level, it's really affirming and touching. And I also think it's good to meet on a human level, for us too. It's not just that you get to see, that's just a person who's playing that character, but we get to see who's watching, and we can connect your whole lives, your whole dreams, and sometimes some tragedies that you went through that maybe, people will say the X-Files helped them get through a very difficult time. I have a lot of women talking about, going into forensics or going into criminal law because of the X-Files. because the Dana Scully character was such a role model. But I also have people talking about spirituality and their spiritual life, people who felt very alone in, seeking kind of more metaphysical things, or even just gently spiritual questioning. And I think that's always very rewarding because, the character, I'm a very spiritual person. And I think that, I think it's a very interesting dynamic that Melissa has with their mom. And even though their mom's Catholic and there's a kind of strict religious thing, they still have this kind of spiritual crossover, which I think is really, really interesting. Sorry, it's my daughter.
That's okay. It happens. If we don't get interrupted by one of my cats, I'll be shocked.
Okay.
You're fine. So before we talk too much about Melissa Scully, really specifically, because I have a lot of questions and thoughts to talk about, but I want to talk a little bit first about your experience with the show. Were you aware of the show before you were cast in it? And kind of what was your knowledge of the show? And had you ever watched the show before you were cast?
Well, I was up in Vancouver doing a show called The Commish when the X-Files kind of rolled into the same studio. And some of the writers went over to that show. And our lighting guy actually went over and did the pilot. So we were very aware of it. And we met Jillian and David because we were sharing the same, stages. So we all kind of became friends and hung out. And so we were not just aware of the show when it was on, but while it was being made, before it aired. So we would go over and sometimes even go on location to watch what they were doing, because it was amazing to us, because it was like a movie. They were making a movie. Our show was very, we still went on location and stuff, but it was very straightforward. We do a master coverage, 2-shot and the thing, and very traditional,
Sure.
TV drama of that time, the early 90s. But X-Files were doing was like making a movie, and it was handheld and experimental and weird angles, and the lighting was incredible. And we were just blown away by how they would shoot in like back alleyways or in dingy hallways, and they just made the lighting look like stained glass windows, and John Bartlett was the DP, just so talented, and the vision that they had. And then seeing it made and how hard they were working, was very exciting to us. So we were, very interested in what they were doing. So actually what happened was, at the end of that first season, when Jillian got pregnant, because Jim and Glenn Morgan and Jim Wong, had been working with them, suggested me to Chris Carter to come on as a new character to kind of play a stand-in FBI agent.
Mm-hmm.
So I met with Chris and it went great. And then they kind of decided it was a little weird to have another redhead play. It was a little bit too weird. We looked like. So they decided to create this character, a man character, and that ended up being Krychek, who got, and my boyfriend at the time, Nick Lee, got that role. And we worked on the audition. I remember it very, very well. But then they came back to me and they said, we're thinking about bringing, we'd love for you to be on the show. We were kind of thinking maybe you would play her sister, because she's, kind of, so let's talk about what that would be like. And so I got to sit with them and talk about ideas I had. And I said, well, really interesting if she was the opposite of her and she was more like Mulder and was really into the mystical, and maybe she's even a psychic. Maybe she's, into crystals and woo-woo stuff that just drives crazy, drives Dave. And that they're really like oil and water, and maybe part of why this stuff with Mulder really gets under her skin is she comes from this, having to already push back on this stuff, and she's more like her dad, very straightforward, black and white, more like Bill. So they thought that was great, and Chris liked that idea, and so they kind of decided to go that direction. So that was super fun.
So it seems like you brought a lot of Melissa to the character. Like you kind of...
Well, they named me Melissa and my name's Melinda. I don't think that was an accident. It's kind of funny. I mean, it's a joke, I guess. But I mean, I think that they, I'm not going to say that was all my idea. And I mean, it was 30 years ago. So,
sure.
But I do think that was maybe something that was already something they thought would be interesting. So, but that was just one conversation, and they created the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I did get to
oh my gosh.
go design and pick out my own crystal. I had this idea that she would wear a choker on her throat chakra. So I went shopping in Vancouver and I found this crystal and just thought she would just wear just a black ribbon, like a cat, like a collar or something. Oh and gosh. So, I have kept it all these years because, so I got to find that. And this was, I thought that was important for her.
I love it. People listening to the XCast right now can't tell, but like she's holding it in her hands and like putting it on. So now she's wearing wearing the crystal. It's amazing.
At the first X-Files con I didn't have it because I couldn't find it, and I realized I sent it to my daughter, and she took it with her somewhere. So I went back in her jewelry box and I got it in. That's why I have it.
That's so great. She just had it. She's like, I'm gonna take this. That's fantastic. Yeah, I think one of the really great things about Melissa Scully is that sort of polar opposite to Dana Scully and sort of where it fits in the sibling dynamic. I'm going to drop some mailbag questions in as we go. And one of them is actually a fan posted this question, but from Pat Skipper. Pat would like to know, why does everyone in the Scully family hate Charles? And why is Bill so much better than Charles?
Wow. I just think Charles is just irritating. Probably.
He's the bad.
There's always one. I think there was a lot of tension around their dinner table. I mean, I think, once puberty hits, like they just span off in different directions, and I don't know. I think he was just, very irritating, a tattletale, know-it-all.
Yeah. I think we can, if we play with that kind of dynamic, right? We have like, I in my mind think of them, the Scully siblings, as like a pendulum that's kind of slowing down, maybe. So you get like Bill like way over here, straight edge, and then Melissa way over here, the opposite, and then sort of back to Dana, and then back to Charles. And maybe that's why we never see Charles. He's reading tarot cards somewhere. We don't know.
He was like, it's too much. These people are too much.
Yeah,
and he
exactly.
So like, because there's a lot of light. That's a lot of light to compete with. He probably had to go make his own star somewhere in some small town.
He's living his life
somewhere, or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and I just thought it was funny. Pat just wanted to drop some questions in for you. A little sibling rivalry there. So do you, back to you, do you remember your first day on set?
My first day?
Mm-hmm.
I could not tell you what my first day, well, maybe. I remember the first big scene, so maybe this was the first day, but she was already in a coma, and I was in a maroon dress, and I was healing her and feeling her energy.
Yes. Yeah.
That day and that set. And that was, kind of me finding my way into the character. And then, Fox comes in, and I'm kind of trying to tell them what she's thinking. And he's just like tripped out and worried about her. And I'm upset. And I do remember that. I think that was the for probably, if not the first day, the second day.
Sure. That's definitely, I think that's the first time we see Melissa, is that scene where he comes in and finds her at Scully's bed. So also took everything I had not to say, not Fox Mulder, but that's okay. That's Scully's line. Don't worry. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit more about Melissa now that we kind of like where you were at the time. Because she's like a spiritual icon on the show. And I was so surprised. I was prepping for this episode and I'm like, okay, I'm going to like have a full day of like X-File watching to prep for Melissa Scully. And really it's like 4 episodes we get of Melissa Scully, and which was, I mean, I know the show and I was shocked how few episodes really we're talking about.
Yeah. And I think was the 5th when I come back as a ghost, or was that one of the 4?
It's one of the 4 on the credit list. So in terms of credit lists, right? So One Breath in season 2, that's while she's in a coma. And then The Blessing Way and Paperclip are season 3, episodes 1 and 2. And then later, season 5, as your voice on the phone.
Yeah.
It's crazy. What a huge impact this character had in 4.
Interesting. It's so interesting. But I think a lot of that is because my character confronts him and says, basically, step up.
Yeah, pretty much. Anytime anybody said that,
like,
box is good.
His BS. Like, I think she's as smart as he is. And he's like, oh, I don't, all this woo woo. And you're not saying anything. It's such, and I'm like, I have your number. Yeah. I just think she understood. But I also think that was one of the, what we now call the Game of Thrones effect, where they kill characters that you don't expect to be killed. I think that was one of those. I don't think anyone expected that Melissa would be murdered. And in the way she was, and as mistaken for Dana.
Yeah.
So I think that was a shock, and something like that can kind of make one of those big iconic moments in a show, and so that kind of elevates the character to kind of having a status that's bigger than the amount of time would.
Right. Well, and I think too, we rarely see Dana Scully interacting with other people in general, but specifically with other women that she's friends with. Yeah. So I think that anytime that shows up, people take notice. But Melissa was really her confidant. Melissa Scully is a big precursor for what we see from Scully in really later seasons with Monica Reyes. But
when you make decisions for your company, you look for the no-brainers. And if you have a lot of mailing to do, Stamps.com is the ultimate no-brainer. Mail checks, invoices, documents, and everything you need to keep your business running. Get rates up to 89% off USPS and UPS. And with the mobile app, you can take care of mailing on the go. Make the same no-brainer decisions as over 1 million other businesses with Stamps.com. Sign up at Stamps.com with code PROGRAM for a special offer. That's Stamps.com, code PROGRAM.
It's really, I think, lasting power. And then to lose that, obviously, we feel for Dana.
Yeah. Well, again, Melissa called Dana on her BS too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you were blocking yourself. You were repressing. And, it doesn't take a genius to see you're repressing, and trying to give her hold some space for her to just, walk through it.
Yeah. Well, and such a powerful influence in her life too. I was just even rewatching this last time, was so surprised, because we think of Dana Scully as very stubborn and not going to deal with it, not going to even acknowledge that this is happening. And Melissa makes one suggestion. She's like, you need to go talk to this person and figure it out. And she's like, okay, and just goes right away. I was like, yeah. That's a mark of how important that relationship was to her. So yeah, powerful character.
Well, it's interesting too. I have 2 sisters. So there's something interesting with sisters that and I'm really close with my sisters, but there's this dual need to push back on what they're saying, and almost a resentment of advice, especially if it's not solicited. And the resentment is almost because they know you so well and they're right. So there's a kind of shortcut that's like, well, I know they're right, so I should just go ahead and give into it, because I'm going to end up giving into it anyway. Which is how I think, if you have good relationships with your sisters, it gets to that point where you're just like, I should listen to them. They know me pretty well. And even though it's so against my instinct, they're probably right,
Yeah.
but that's the writing, that's the writing. And the interesting thing about Melissa, she's pretty on the nose. She's not, the character was pretty direct.
Yeah, very.
It's challenging as an actor sometimes when you have a character that's very direct. Most people in life are not direct. And so as an actor, when you read character, you're looking for what's betraying what they really think, the subtext. What are they really thinking? Because we don't usually say as bluntly with our words what we're really thinking. We're finding a way in. We might be softening it. We might even be toughening it. When we're scared, we're tougher, So when someone is so clear in what their alignment with their truth and then speaking it exactly as it occurs to them, it can be a little challenging to play them, because then what's the behavior? Because a lot of times the fun as an actor is betraying the truth. The way they sip a cup of coffee, they're like, maybe their nerves are coming out in how they're touching the rim of the cup, or, there's little clues. Like when you watch people, you can see people are always giving little clues. But when someone's so direct, and that is also, I think, a testament to Jillian's acting also, because she had a character that was, now she had a lot of behavior, and she didn't always say as clearly as she really wanted to, but she was very clear in her dialogue. So there has to be like a simplicity with it. And so I think having them together, the way they wrote it made a lot of sense to me. It's like they're both very clear, coming from very different points of view.
Yeah.
So how's it gonna work? And Jillian just made a choice that there was something about me that softened her.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is a really good place to ask a mailbag question, actually, from Kathy, who says, what do you, Melinda, think about how the sibling relationship was portrayed? Is it important how they were two very different women, but both powerful in their own ways?
I mean, I think it's very interesting. I have one daughter, right? So we have a triangle. And a lot of the dynamics that are in families, sometimes the triangle is interesting, the square is interesting. So you have to think that you have the family, but then everyone has a relationship with everyone separately. So it starts to multiply exponentially. So you got let's say in a nuclear family of a mom and a dad, a kid. So you got the kid with the mom, the kid with the dad, and the kid with their relationship, they all have, and then they have a thing together. So the more you have, the more relationships are crossing over, the more tapestry is weaving. And I think unconsciously, we will, like when we were kids, we got kind of labeled like, well, I was the writer, my oldest sister was the actor, and the middle one was the musician or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of have this family mythology. And one of the things you do is you start to say, and I don't know if this happens in your family, but you start to say, you look more like mom. You look more like dad. You have mom's mannerisms. You have dad's way of delivering a joke. You have it. And you start to like assign. And so as they're assigned, we start to kind of believe that, right? So I think that getting her dad's and Bill's maybe more linear thinking and the kind of suspicion about things that aren't solid. And then Melissa getting that faith and that spirituality and the intellectual rigor of mom, and with dad too. But I think it's almost like you split. It's like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
And I think that that's true of Mulder and Dana anyway, which is why we always want them to come together, because they're two sides of the same coin.
Right. No, I think that's exactly it. And I think too, if you watch the show from start to finish, the show is so much about Dana Scully going from that really sort of rational scientific thinking to expanding her mind about and her beliefs about what might be possible and what might be out there. And you can kind of see the influence that people like Melissa and Mulder and then others later have on her. Like, I think it's about her growing into that. So I think that's great. Yeah, that's exactly
great expanding. Like, she starts in a rigid place.
Yeah.
And of course, that's what Mulder was always asking her to do, and why she's so attracted to him, and why she listens to Melissa, because she wants to expand. She's afraid, and she's checking herself, making sure she's not falling for anything. It's like, she doesn't want to be a fool.
Right.
And I think she's such an interesting character, because it's kind of like, I don't want to get too broad about it.
No, it's okay.
But I get philosophical about stuff, or why I think particular pieces influence the culture, because it is kind of a projection of the scaffolding of like our society, right? Of this like materialistic, it's not true if you don't see it. This kind of materialistic way of, we're here to do this, we live and then we die. We have to make sure things are safe. There's a way to do things. There's the patriarchy, and there's a scaffolding to it all, and it's just better this way. And we're so in it that we don't even notice it. So when people come along and they're like, oh, but what if there's all this stuff that we're in and we're not aware of? And it's like mind blowing.
Yeah.
And that's why some people need drugs to even expand that idea that you can, what if this really is like a parallel universe? What if we are in the Matrix? What if there's an infinite possibility of all these things happening at the same time? What if we could time travel? What if, all this stuff they're finding out as, we start learning more in science and everything? I just think that the human, what we always want more. We're greedy. We want more. We get something. We want more. We went to the moon. Now we want to go to Mars. We learn this. We want to learn more. And I think that's true spiritually too. It's like, when you have a crush on someone, then you have a date and you're like, now I want more. And then you get the person. Okay, let's plan a trip. I want to go do more. Well, I just think it's just such a great structure that the X-Files had, of these two people who both want to understand, and the what's driving them and what's stopping them, and how they have to have each other it's not just for the conflict of the show, it's like for their relationship. They have to have each other to keep pushing each other and then checking each other.
Yeah.
Push, check, coming together, coming apart, coming together, coming apart. And I just think it's a universal, pattern of human expansion and growth and curiosity. Yeah. They just did such a job. So it's very timeless in that way.
It is. We talk, obviously we're fans on a podcast talking about a show that's 30 years old. We talk about that all the time. I thought that was beautiful. That was lovely.
The things that really hit, that kind of stay, like sometimes there's no rhyme or reason, but I think this one is pretty archetypal, and it has big themes in it.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk some more about like your experience on the show. Thinking about, we already talked about the first scene that you kind of remember in one breath. Is there a day that you remember, or a scene that you remember like filming as your favorite or like best? You were like, I'm feeling it this day.
I really, there's two scenes that I really remember. I remember shooting the scene in Mulder's apartment when it's dark and I'm going, what the hell here? Hiding, you very wimpy man. Like, you are not actually hiding, and you look, everyone sees you, and I see right through this. And, what are you delaying? What are you running away from? And just how it was just so interesting. Dave is a very interesting guy, very, very, very funny guy, extremely dry, incredibly well-read and smart. And we knew each other, socially. it was really interesting to do that scene with him because, and of course I was used to his kind of deadpan and the throwaway and the character, but he got really upset when I was like, you know, it's the light is what you need to walk to the light. And he said that line, you're not saying anything, you know, enough of all that. And he got so upset and he had like on the verge of tears, like furious and helpless. And so I remember that because I wasn't expecting it. I mean, Melissa certainly changed Melissa's point of view about him. And even though, you know, I feel like she knew the depth of his feelings, she already knew. I also think there was this undercurrent of attraction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, like it makes sense Melissa would be attracted to this guy and also wanting to kill him because wanting to protect Dana.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, I'm as an actor, I'm going to always try to choose the most complicated.
Sure.
Your barriers, right? So what's going on, you know? And that him getting upset he was such a little boy in that moment. And it really affected my performance in a way that I thought it was very memorable in that way, but also seeing how much he loved her.
Yeah.
And going, oh, okay. You know, like this is like a destiny thing that I think she already was feeling that, but like it was very, very clear. And he didn't do anything to indicate that. It was just his emotional response, you know? So that's very memorable. And then I really liked the scene with she and I in the kitchen when we're having tea. And I'm kind of telling her she's like, you know, blocking this stuff. Like, I just liked it because it just felt like we were learning something about each other while we knew each other so well. I felt like I don't know how to describe it, but there's almost like an intuitive kind of. It was just a really, really she's just very interesting to work with because again, she's very rigid. Like she was so rigid. So so how do you get through to someone who's so rigid? You want to strangle her. So
yeah.
So it was really, I mean, it's really, you know, Melissa's just a really, really fun character to play.
Yeah.
She's completely free to just be on a wavelength and be whatever, and not going to take any kind of poo-pooing of her point of view.
Right.
Just going to dismiss it as you're full of shit. You're boring.
Yeah.
I both know that there's in the world, you and I both know that there's stuff you don't understand. So you can pretend you get it and go ahead, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so speaking of Melissa, Tony Black has a kind of several point question for you. What do you think about the actual mechanics of Melissa's death? It was sudden, almost off screen, in a manner that many recurring characters with so much importance would not usually experience. It's a brutal gut punch and not given any advance, like build up. So were you pleased with it, or would you have rather it gone a different way?
Oh, no. I was devastated. And Nick was too. Nick and I were dating at the time when he shot me. It was, but I'll tell you, look, I don't think that's what they had planned, but I got another show. And back then, you would have to ask Chris this, but back then you were not allowed to be a regular on a show and recur on another network or another show. You weren't even allowed to recur on the same network unless there was a very special deal that, like, if you were already recurring on, but you were not allowed to. They want to hold you to. They own you when you're on a show. And I got a show that was by the people who did Frasier, and it looked like it was going to be a big hit, and they, you know, I wouldn't be available anyway.
Right.
So, so I think it maybe pushed that decision, which was right. It was the right decision for the narrative. Yeah. But I think that may have been the catalyst of it. And I was like, why don't you wait and see if the show actually goes for a while? And we shot 13, and I think they aired like 9 or 10 or
Sure.
Brad Garrett was on it, Larry Miller. It was, a good show, but it just didn't make it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was all the reason, but no, it was very upsetting. So when I got called and got to come back as a ghost, I was very happy. But I want to be a ghost more often. But only so many times you can
right.
But no, it was very upsetting, and I was very close to the crew because a lot of that crew was my crew from the same crew from the commission. And I had a lot of friends, and was living in Vancouver. So I come down to LA. I was doing this thing. But no, I didn't. I was very, very sad about it.
It is. I think you're right in saying it was right in the narrative. I think that 2-parter at the beginning of that season, it's so good. Paperclip is such a good episode.
Really my favorite episode.
It's so good. I love it. But
I think
yeah,
the violence of it, while shocking, I just don't know how else she would know for sure she was really dead. I also think it makes sense that they couldn't see her face and they would mistake her. It makes sense that it was cry check. It's just all has this poetic thing to it. So I've been killed on other shows and I've been unhappy about how they did it. But this was a little more noir.
Yeah.
And elegant, I thought.
Yeah.
So I feel good about it. And in hindsight, I feel good about it. Yeah.
Sure. But nobody wants Melissa to die. Obviously, nobody wants.
I didn't want to. I think visually, it's actually very pretty.
It's gorgeous. Everything in that episode is gorgeous. It's
the lighting.
Yeah. Anyway, I think about that. I think about the very last shot in Paperclip all the time, where Dana is sitting in front of the empty bed. The bed is empty now, and like Mulder comes in. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so sad. We're gonna do a few more X-Files mailbag questions. Then I have, like I said, several non-X-File mailbag questions. So we're just kind of move through these pretty quick because I know we're coming up on our time a little bit. So Chris would like to know, what did you think about Melissa being a potential love interest for Mulder?
Well, Chris, I think I already touched on that. It made total sense to me that, first of all, they would be a foil for Dana. I think that adds to the tension. It adds to the, oh, no, don't do it. Don't go there, that the audience can have with and how juicy and complicated that it's her sister. Yeah. So I think it was a pretty obvious and compelling place to go. And of course, really fun to play.
Yeah.
Having all of that and flying around and that kind of sitting across. I remember this scene, in one breath when we go to the cafeteria and we're sitting across from each other talking. I think it's, feeling that out, or what is this energy and not knowing. And I think that, it's early enough too in the series where you're still getting to know what is going to happen with them, like where, how much of a dance are they doing, Dana and Mulder, right?
Yeah.
So, I think it was perfect. If not me, it would have been some other character. I mean, you always have to have, but I think it was really juicy. Yeah, really fun.
Yeah. I think I read a fanfic once that starts with Mulder dating Melissa, and then eventually Melissa breaks up with them and she's like, you should date us. Yeah, or that exactly. Kind of like, I'm not going to date him, but you should. I think I read a fanfic like,
yeah, I don't think I made this up, but I do think that actually was kind of in the cards.
Great.
That was something that was going to be, there was definitely something that they were talking about.
Right. It was in the brains.
Yeah, that they would have actually had a relationship. And that, of course, that would just make the audience crazy and just prolong the whole agony. Yeah. So it's juicy. I mean, that's fun.
That is fun. Okay. John would like to know, if you could have continued as the character of Melissa, where do you see her going? And did you have ideas that you personally wanted to include?
Well, I do think that relationship idea is very cool. But I always thought, I assumed I was going to be on it for a while.
Right.
So I thought she would end up going to work for them as a kind of special, spiritual envoy, and that I would end up having visions that they would do a case I knew nothing about, in the 3D world, and I had visions or a dream or something, and went to her and said, something's going on. I'm seeing this body in a field or whatever. And so they would have been able to use her as a resource, and it would have gotten complicated. And then she would have been wrong about some stuff and right about some stuff. And, there would have been an argument to use me at all in the first place, that is it ethical and all this stuff. So I really wanted to get in on the grinding.
Yeah, that sounds great. They're like out having adventures somewhere. That sounds amazing.
Or just even like in front of my crystals or whatever, and just, as someone that they call in or whatever. Or maybe they took me out to the fields and I'd be walking. Because, she gets more into that side of things.
Yeah, I could totally see her like in a crime scene with the vibes happening for sure. Okay, Paige would like to know, did you take notice of a massive change in the fan attitudes toward Melissa? According to Paige, she was kind of reviled for a little while and then transformed over the years into being beloved because fans are weird.
I love all my characters, so it's a total shock to me to hear she was reviled. Why?
I don't know. I don't remember that either, but I'm a pretty new fan to the X-Files, so I don't know that story.
She would be reviled. So no, as far as I'm concerned, like I'd never had anyone say anything like that to me. But God bless you. Like, respond. I got plenty of other characters that I understand that with, but with Melissa, I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never met anyone who does like Melissa Scully, but Paige apparently has. So sorry, Paige.
I'm glad she grew on you.
Yeah, right. Sorry. We have a lot of questions. Well, like 4 questions about shows that you did after the X-Files, after Melissa Scully, or kind of maybe a little bit during. Ron said or asked if you could talk about your episode of the show Millennium with Lance Henriksen and Terry O'Quinn. Yes.
And Mark Massey. Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Michael. Yeah, that show was dark.
Yeah. A lot of crossover fans. Fans.
Oh, sure. Of course. I love Terry so much. He's such a beautiful, beautiful human being. We had so much fun. And Megan Gallagher, by the way, we're still friends, good friends, who played Lance's wife in that show. And most of my stuff was with Terry and Michael. And I played a psychiatrist at a institution. One of my patients had some kind of supernatural possession, I think. So no, it was really interesting, really rewarding. Again, very film noir, very beautiful lighting, beautifully shot, and in Vancouver, and very exciting to be a part of because it was just so beautiful. I mean, I remember walking into rooms that we'd be shooting, and I'm like, I can't see anyone. It's so dark, and we'd be looking through files. I'm like, how are we supposed to be reading these files? It's so dark. And so it was really the beginning of my experience in television with the X-Files and Millennium, working in things that were lit like film. And then as I went on to do film, I began to understand. They shot it as if they had spent days and days on it. And for all I know, they did have an extra crew that was lighting it. But that was what made the biggest impression on me, really, was that the lighting and how beautiful it was, and and of course a great crew, of course, and wonderful time. All the actors were wonderful.
Yeah, awesome. Carl's one of our showrunners here on the XCast. Would like any reflections you might have about your time on Mad Men?
Yeah, well, that's a character that. But again, at first I was very hurt and shocked for her to read some of the responses to her, because I thought it was very sexist. Actually, I saw her as being a female Dawn. Basically, she was just more honest about it.
Yeah.
So I was more open about it. So I was very shocked at the kind of judgment that Bobby Barrett got, where he was like a hero. And I was like, that's just incredible. I mean, here's a woman completely self-made, started off, probably as a dancer in clubs and stuff, very bright, self-taught, savvy woman who created herself completely and ended up, probably dating these, was a showgirl, started dating the talent, hooked up with this guy, Jimmy, and became his manager.
Yeah.
And, usually won these kinds of business negotiations. I thought it was an incredible character, the writing on that show. I mean, I'm seeing Patrick Fischler, who played Jimmy Barrett, seeing him in about a week and a half, and his wife, Lauren Bowles, who's a wonderful friend as well. I saw John Hamm just recently, and friends with a lot of people from that show. It was kind of like the X-Files. I've been on a few things where you kind of knew while you were doing it that it was special, and the X-Files was like that, and Mad Men was like that. I mean, I had not seen Mad Men before I auditioned for it, and I'm really glad I hadn't, because I think I would have probably been in my head a little bit. I would have wanted to watch, and it, just the writing on that show, it's so clean, it's so deep and layered, and again, it's so visually, staggeringly stunning and perfect. And everyone worked very hard on that show. But it was a wonderful experience, I think, for me. I think I was about 43, 44 when I did that. So it was kind of, I had been working steadily, but it was like a second kind of beginning for me doing the show. I got a lot of heat out there because the character was so complex, because she is someone that you're, despising or looking down on. And then all of a sudden there she is, giving Peggy this feminist advice that's actually good advice. But I think she's a character that when you look back, because I've gotten a lot of people coming back to me going, now I really get her and why she's kind of an icon, because she was not going to take any shit, but within the realm of how much the parameters of what she had to. So she was playing them at their own game. That's how she was trying to say to Peggy, you're not going to get anywhere being a man. So just own it and do it like you. But you also have to, if you want to be relevant, you must demand relevance.
Yeah.
And she was a scary character. She went into a man's world and she demanded relevance. And she demanded it. And maybe people were rooting for, Betty Draper at the time, but she was going to be Don's equal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it really threatened people. I think people did not like it.
No, they did that.
That was fascinating. And that's just, but of course, when you play a character, you can't judge them. So you can't go into a character and say, God, she's a slut.
Like, man, I hate that one.
What a gross, character. You have to understand what someone is doing. And this was a very powerful woman living life on her own terms.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Now he does leave her tied to a bed. So that's not very dignified. But you do end up seeing her again, none the worse for the wear. So, I think she was a really fascinating character. Yeah. I loved it. I didn't want to not come back.
That's another one.
Yes, another one.
Kurt, another showrunner, would like your thoughts about working on The Dark Knight with Christopher Nolan.
Oh,
he's a big fan.
I mean, Christopher Nolan. There you go. There's another one, right?
Yeah.
Special. Again, I have to tell you that audition. It's so fascinating. Yeah. I got called in. I had 5. There was a page, maybe 10 lines, 5 lines for me, 5 lines for a cop coming to my door. No context. They didn't tell us what the project was. We weren't allowed to know.
Okay.
We weren't allowed to know even who I didn't know who I was auditioning for. I only knew John Papsadero, the casting director. They told us nothing about the character, not how old, not where it was, nothing. Blind. So I showed up there, and there's all these different kinds of actors clearly there was no one there for my role. It was all like a much older African-American guy, a much younger Asian girl, all these different types. And
right.
I went and I did it. And it was months later that I found out like a week later that it was for the second Batman movie.
Yeah.
And then I found out like 2 months later that I got it and that I was going to be playing Gary Oldman's wife.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Gary Oldman's kids and my kids were in the same preschool. So I never found.
Yeah.
So this is Los Angeles. This doesn't happen. Then I got the part and it was shooting in London. I was so excited. And we sat down and I had not watched Batman Begins. And I put on Batman Begins and my jaw fell open. And I looked at my husband and I was like, I cannot believe I did that. I loved Batman Begins so much. I was beside myself. So I went to Chicago first and worked with Gary, did all the stuff at the apartment. And then we went to London and did this stuff in the abandoned Battersea electric power. And it was actually very dangerous. We had to wear hard hats and it was very scary. And that's where I'm at. So when I worked in Chicago, I met Keith and I, got to work with Gary. And then when we actually flew back together, that was really fun because we got to know each other better on the plane ride back. And then we found out we had some friends in common. That was really nice. Then when I went to London, I only worked 3 or 4 days and I was there for like 10 days. And, I still live in London. I lived there for 7 years. So it was really wonderful to be there. But so I met Christian and he was very nice. But the thing is about that, working with Gary, he's very, he's English trained and so am I. And there's we kind of are very easy when the camera's not rolling, joking around through. And then it's action and, you're working. And I don't know where Christian was trained. I don't know. But I know because of that bat suit, it is so heavy. There is total silence between every take. You have got to be quiet and focused because it is so exhausting to wear that thing that there was no room for anything but just really. Plus, it was very harrowing scenes where we'd been kidnapped and the kids, and it was very intense. But Chris Nolan is very interesting. He wears the same jacket every day. It's a suit. He wears a suit with black pants and black shoes and the same jacket every day. I know a few directors who do that. And I don't know if it's so you can find him quickly because you always know what he's wearing. It's a good luck thing.
Maybe.
I don't know. I know a few people who do that. He's the kind of guy who he casts you and he lets you do your work. He doesn't get in there. He's not trying to, he cast me. I showed up, played it. He didn't tell me to do things. He didn't tell me not to do things. That was it. He's very hands off and very focused. And Wally Pfister, the lighting guy, what a genius, watched like this, was I wish I'd had more to do, of course. But, I love that movie. I'm so proud to have been involved with it in any way. I think it's I never got to meet Heath Ledger, much to my,
so sad.
Yeah.
Okay, well, my personal favorite that's not the X-Files is The West Wing. You are also a recurring character on The West Wing. You are in like all the things. So we're just going to talk to you about all the things.
Iconic, incredible show.
I know.
Right at the end. I was so lucky.
Totally fine. Still counts. In The West Wing. Yeah, I love that.
It's so funny that I was at the California, I was at a Democratic Party convention and people will walk up to me sometimes and a lot of times I'll get, "Are you who I think you are?" And I always have to look at where I am. Because sometimes they're talking about the X-Files, sometimes it's Mad Men, sometimes it's Seinfeld, sometimes it's not The Dark Knight because that movie's so dark no one can tell, but that's but I knew what he was asking because we were at this and it was of course The West Wing. So and he was like 21 years old.
No, I mean now things are on streaming, I'm like I said, I kind of mentioned earlier, I'm a new fan of I did not watch the X-Files at all until it was on Netflix. You know what I mean? So now you can find
so cool
just about anything. Yeah.
I always tell my actor friends if they feel like our things are going slow and I'm not relevant, I'm like, everything you ever did, someone is watching it right now. Somewhere in the world is watching your work. And hopefully, you'll get some residuals for it.
Right. And hopefully you get paid. Yeah.
It's an incredible time.
Um,
So yes, The West Wing.
The West
What would
Wing.
you?
I don't know, general thought. I'm trying to remember if there's like a specific episode that I love with you in The West Wing, but honestly, I love that part of The West Wing. I actually love that second, third, whatever election part of it.
Well, it was really interesting. I got to play Alan Alda's campaign manager.
Yes.
Republican, so going against Jimmy Smith.
Sure.
Got to work with Ron Silver and Stephen Root. Oh my God, Alan, incredible, and Brad Whitford a little bit, and who I've known for years, and Alan Alda, who was so incredible, and Lawrence O'Donnell was actually at the room I auditioned, and he had been working at the White House, of course, so he was their creative consultant. It was an incredible experience. I really loved every second of that.
Yeah.
It was really fun playing someone who was so ambitious, and they actually even had her. It was such a prescient show. They wrote that when they said that Jimmy Smits won, I said you have to demand a recount.
Right. And of course you did.
He was an upstanding. He was like an upstanding, democracy-loving dude, and he said, "No, I'll concede." And we were like, "No, you can't concede." And it was just such a. We're watching it now again. It's very comforting, and it's also, I think, very helpful, because even though some people was like, "Oh, it was a little preachy" or whatever, it's so educational about our system, about our representational system, about the parties, about the Congress, about the Senate, about all of the nonsense, and especially about the press and how things get through, how they're blocked, all the backroom deals, all the stuff. And I still learn every time I watch an episode. I learn from it. It was I feel so blessed and so lucky that I got to be a part of that in its final season. It was a very, very special.
Yeah, I think I mean, like all shows, obviously it ages over time, but I think there's so much in The West Wing that is so relevant, so relevant to the world.
It's to look at it with fresh eyes from the last 8-9 years. It's so important to remember how there was always transactionalism. There's always been corruption. There's always been people fooling around and making these deals and using this system to enrich themselves.
Yeah.
But to have it all out in the open, it is an opportunity for us to look at it now and figure out what we're going to stand for and what we're not.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, I love things that are educational, and the X-Files is educational.
Agreed. Well, kind of along those lines, I just want to make sure before we wrap this up, like I said, I was at File Fest, and I was in your panel, and I was there for your amazing, I don't even know how to describe it, like amazing speech about the strike that was on at the time. So first of all, I just wanted to thank you for giving that speech and saying like brave words about how important it is. I'm an artist. I do hand lettering and calligraphy. So AI is like a terrifying specter on the horizon of the art world. So I just wanted to thank you so much for speaking about that so like passionately and directly. I guess I was going to say forwardly. That's not right. Directly. But yeah, it was amazing. I was so sad when I realized that the recording of the panel, the one thing that did not get recorded was that speech.
Isn't that interesting? It's interesting, right? Huh. I don't think I said anything that would have gotten me in trouble. I certainly didn't say anything I wouldn't say publicly. I think it's great we resolved the strike. I think AI is still a really big issue. I think I mentioned, my husband's running for state assembly here in our district. And we live in a district that was a zone of interest for the entertainment industry. He's a composer and sound designer and was started as an actor years and years ago, but he's a musician mostly. And we owned a small business. AI, my daughter is in film school to become an editor. I'm not only an actor, I'm a writer, but also an acting teacher. the arts are fundamental, all of the arts, to a healthy democracy. The arts are where we tell stories and we connect above all of our differences, and with our differences, bringing our differences with them.
Right.
And a lot of times the storytelling is how we first see people who are different from us or raised differently from us. And then, when I think about AI and you start thinking about machine generated art, it still is going to have a point of view. Who are the people who are designing that art?
Yeah.
So you got one person maybe, or a small group of people designing art that can make all these things, but art is a human endeavor. So that's why, as I said then, I don't call it digital art, call it artificial.
Right.
Artificially generated art or AI art. I don't even word AI, I say image.
Yeah.
Tough. But it's hard for especially someone who's, when you're doing hand lettering, which is, is there anything more beautiful than getting an invitation to a wedding in your mailbox on beautiful paper that's maybe handmade paper,
right,
with hand lettering with actual ink by a human being?
Right. I'm a big, I call it fun mail. I have a Patreon. I send fun mail to my people. Like, that's what we call it, is fun mail. I send hand lettered mail all the time because nobody doesn't like to get something really fun or handmade in their mail. Everyone likes it. I don't know anyone who doesn't love that.
No, it's so special. And one of the reasons my husband is running is because there needs to be a voice for the arts in legislation. And in California here, we've got Silicon Valley, and there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
To make sure AI has this unfettered, but we're smarter than that. We need people because it's a labor issue, and it's also an arts issue. It's a humanitarian issue. It's a I would say a social services issue. I don't know how many young people but I'm teaching these students. They've gone through COVID, so they've been isolated, but they also have a whole new way of communicating through social media and of looking at themselves, projecting onto or seeing what their lives are supposed to look like. And there's these filters, and there's Ozempic, and there's there's all of this stuff to conform. And what I would just like to say to you beautiful X-Files listeners, conforming is death. It is a trap. It is the opposite of freedom. When you conform, you are giving yourself away. You are giving yourself away to an idea of materialism. It's why I love, the word basic. He's a basic. You know what?
Basic. Yeah.
It's basic. You want to conform? Be basic.
Basic.
Courage is where life is. Your individuality, the thing that no one else can do or bring to the world, the way you can hug someone, the way you can listen, the way you talk to your cat, the way you can make chocolate chip cookies, the way you go to work and you bring your spirit, the way you smile at the grocery clerk. This is you, your atoms together for this one beautiful, brief moment. Do not give it away. Do not try to copy. Own yourself, lean into it, and let people follow you by themselves. And that we're here to do. And that is what I think one of the reasons people like the X-Files, because it's like the truth is out there.
Right.
You keep seeking and don't settle for these images you're being fed, and make your voice heard about AI. Like, no, I don't want algorithms telling me who I am and being designed for me. They don't get to decide. Break free. They shouldn't. You could use it, but don't let it use you.
Right. That was great. Agreed. So everyone listen to your favorite big sister. Right there.
I got my on. I got them out. You don't see them, but a cauldron is over in the corner. I don't use a cauldron, but I do like to make soup.
Okay.
But I
do think soup is good too. People also love soup. So that's great. Okay. Well, Melinda, do you have any upcoming projects or anything that you want to talk about or share with listeners before we sign off?
Well, I do have something that is still streaming on Peacock that came out about a year ago.
Awesome.
It's called Paul T. Goldman.
Okay.
It is a documentary / mockumentary / scripted show by a genius named Jason Wallner, who directed the second Borat film.
Okay.
And it is starring a real person named Paul Goldman, and it is his life story. He wrote a book about his life and wanted to make it into a movie. So Jason decided to make a documentary about making it into a movie. And he asked me to play one of the main characters in it. Awesome. So it's a 6-part, and it's short. I think it's like half an hour, 40 minutes each episode. So very bingeable. It is the craziest ride, and it is so fascinating. So I play myself, but also this character. And I would love to hear what people think about it. But it is really, really interesting. So if you like things that are, if you like Nathan Fielder or, The Rehearsal or things like that, or Borat or stuff that melds fiction with real people, I think you'll enjoy it. But it's mostly just him and a bunch of actors. He hired to play the real people. So he gets to do the scenes from his life. And I think everyone should to do that.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Everyone go on Peacock, right? Everyone go stream on Peacock.
Yeah.
Awesome. And where might people find you out in the world?
I'm on Instagram at Melinda _McGraw. I am on X still as that same handle.
Right.
I am on Threads as Melinda McGraw. And I do think I have a Facebook actor fan page.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking time to chat with me today. It has been awesome.
Thank you.
And listeners, you can find me on Instagram if you just search for my name, Cortlan. And you can find the XCast on X at the X_cast, on Instagram at the XCast pod, and on Facebook in our Facebook group, the X-Files Basement, the XCast podcast fan group. You can also find early access to episodes like this one and other bonus episodes if you support the show on Patreon. So thanks everyone for listening, and remember, trust no one.
The XCast, an X-Files podcast, was created by Tony Black and is produced and hosted by Carl Sweeney, Sarah Blair, and Kurt North.
You can find the podcast on Twitter at the X_cast, on Facebook by typing in the XCast, and in our group, X-Files Basement, the XCast podcast fan group, and on Instagram at the XCast pod.
Don't forget, you can support the show by becoming a member on Patreon. Our patrons get early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes chats with our hosts and a thriving community of X-Files, and other premium interviews and specials. To find out more and subscribe, you can go to patreon.com/thexcast. That's patreon.com/thexcast.
We are also part of the We Made This podcast network, full of popular culture shows, including our Millennium series, The Time Is Now. You can find all of our shows at our website, wemadethispod.com, or via Twitter at wemadethispod.
Thanks for listening and keep watching the skies.